vast and complicated. It is filled with stories, some of which are quite strange. Let's take a closer look into the weird tales of nature. Trees are among the longest-lived organisms on the planet, and while some may persist for millennia, most live at least a few decades. Still, whether it persists for 50 years or 5,000, there comes a point where a tree must eventually fall. It might succumb to disease, or insect invasion, or bad weather, or any number of other things. There is the old philosophical question that asks, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody is there to hear it, does it make a sound? I would ask instead, when a tree falls in the forest and nobody is there to carry it away, what happens next? The obvious answer is, of course, that the tree decays until eventually nothing remains. This short answer, while accurate enough, misses a number of interesting and potentially important details. In a properly functioning ecosystem, death and life are closely linked, with the one leading into the other. The death of a single tree becomes the catalyst for the formation of an entire community of organisms. A dead stump may often support a thick covering of moss and lichen, with an associated community of invertebrates and microbes. Beneath this, fungi eat away at the decaying wood, along with beetles and termites. New plants grow out of the old remains, further enriching this little community. It's almost as though the fallen tree has been transformed into a city of strange alien life. Before any of this can happen, there is a rather significant problem to be overcome. Being made of wood and bark, a tree is remarkably resistant to decay. The cellulose in wood is a resilient material, which requires the collaboration of several specialized enzymes to break down. However, this is not the toughest component. All higher plants produce varying quantities of a rather amorphous and intractable substance called lignin. This lignin is a chemically complex material, and it is as resistant to enzymatic breakdown as most plastics. In addition, the heartwood of older trees tends to become infused with all sorts of exciting volatile compounds collectively known as extractives. These often confer a strong resistance to decay and insect invasion, exemplified in trees like redwoods, sequoias, and cedar. The distinct scent of cedar shavings is a result of these extractives. The rich hues of certain commercially used hardwoods are also due to such substances. Despite the rather resilient chemistry of wood, there are quite a few forms of life that specialize in consuming it. After all, wood is abundant in many environments and difficult to digest. Thus, any species that develops the ability to subsist on wood will have an abundant food source with relatively little competition. So there is a definite incentive for the development of such specializations. Of course, termites are among the most well-known consumers of wood, and we will address them in due time. To start with, though, let us consider fungi. A fungal mycelium is uniquely suited to breaking down any number of organic compounds as it grows and spreads through its environment. Many species of fungi are capable of producing enzymes that surpass anything found in the animal kingdom. As may be expected, there are a number of particular types of fungi that specialize in feeding on wood. One of the most notorious species is Serpula lacrymans, a fungus often referred to as dry rot. Roughly translated, the scientific name means the creeping maker of tears. Anybody who has had a structure invaded by this particular fungus could appreciate such a meaning. Wood in structures is typically kept dry, unless there are plumbing issues, and this minimizes fungal and bacterial growth and tends to preserve the wood for decades, if not centuries. It is more or less axiomatic that life requires at least a little bit of water to carry out its chemical processes, and this includes digestion. What makes Serpula so devastating is its ability to find a way around this little water problem. The fungus produces specialized bundles of hyphae arranged into water-conducting tubes that resemble branching roots. They are technically known as rhizomorphs, or root forms in rough translation. With these structures, Serpula can bring water up from the underlying soil into the otherwise dry wood of a structure. Once the water is supplied, digestion can readily proceed. Still, for all its effectiveness, Serpula does lack one key ability. It can digest cellulose and the similar hemicelluloses typically found in wood, but it cannot properly break down lignin. The end result of its digestive process is a brown, somewhat spongy material that often crumbles into cuboid shapes. Because of this brown coloration, the fungi that can break down cellulose but not lignin are often classified as forms of brown rot. There are other fungi that can break down the lignin in wood as well as the cellulose and other polysaccharides. These are collectively known as white rot, because they leave behind a white fibrous remnant that easily crumbles away. Essentially, with the lignin completely digested, all that remains is a few errant fibers of leftover cellulose. To return to our fallen tree, the various fungal species will colonize the bark and the underlying wood quite readily. There is a fierce competition between these different species, sometimes resulting in a mottled appearance commonly seen in rotting wood. With a bit of time, the combination of fungi and bacteria reduce the hard, resilient wood to a soft, spongy material that is almost ideal for new life to take root in. Fungi are so effective in this role that certain species of wood-boring beetles have enlisted them. Such beetles are commonly known as ambrosia beetles, and the passages they excavate tend to be lined with fungal growth. The beetles subsist upon this fungus rather than the wood itself, and so extract nutrients from the wood in an indirect manner. In addition to acting as a food source for the beetles, the associated fungus often stains the surrounding wood, making infestations relatively easy to identify. There are several cases of mutualism between various fungi and insects, and this is an interesting topic in its own right. Still, not all wood-destroying insects work with fungi. Indeed, there are groups that avoid and even inhibit the growth of both fungi and bacteria whenever they excavate tunnels into dead wood. The foremost of these groups is the carpenter ants. While these ants construct their nests by excavating wood, they do not actually consume the wood. It is merely a convenient shelter, and as such, they have no interest in furthering its chemical decomposition. Indeed, a key characteristic shared by all ant species is a specialized pair of glands that secrete potent antimicrobial substances. These are known as the metapleural glands, and they allow ants to maintain an impressive degree of cleanliness no matter where their nests might be located. A similar use of dead wood is seen in carpenter bees, although these species tend to be solitary rather than colonial like the ants. Individual carpenter bee burrows are just large enough to house developing offspring, and are quite modest in comparison to the carpenter ant excavations. Interestingly enough, there are quite a number of colonial wasps that make small contributions to the decomposition of wood. Any wasps that construct a papery nest obtain their building materials by scraping away tiny bits of wood from available sources. These sources may include fallen logs, stacks of firewood, or unpainted decks and porches. To return to the wood consumers, there are a large number of beetles that feed on wood during their larval stages. These include bark beetles, jewel beetles, click beetles, longhorned beetles, powder post beetles, deathwatch beetles, and several types of weevil. The overall pattern seen among these groups is largely the same. A female beetle lays eggs on or in the dead wood, the larvae hatch, and they slowly gnaw their way through the wood as they grow and develop. They eventually metamorphose into pupae, protected inside their secluded wooden fortresses, and then emerge as adults. The details differ in the types of wood that are fed upon and how decomposed this wood is. Some beetle varieties favor conifers, while others will only feed on hardwoods. Some require a degree of dampness, while others can manage with wood that is almost completely dry. Many of these wood-boring beetle species can often switch from devouring fallen logs to devouring homes, and cause considerable damage in the process. Last but not least, we come to the termites. While these could be classified in many ways, 3 groups might be of particular interest here. These are the drywood termites, the dampwood termites, and the subterranean termites. The drywood termites form relatively small colonies and live in a manner not unlike many of the wood-boring beetles. As one might guess by the name, drywood termites are especially adept at subsisting on very dry wood, making the most of limited water supplies. One might see little more than an unobtrusive hole in the wall, with a small pile of tiny dry pellets accumulated beneath it. These are the end products of the drywood termites' digestion. Dampwood termites are, perhaps not surprisingly, largely confined to damp and rotting wood. While these species are of little concern for structural damage, they are proficient decomposers of dead trees. They often have relatively large body sizes, as seen in the Zootermopsis species found in western North America, and Neotermes species found in eastern North America. Subterranean termites are among the most proficient of feeders, capable of destroying structures if given sufficient time. These termites nest underground and bring moisture up into whatever wood they happen to be feeding on. They are known to construct mud tubes between the ground and their latest meal. These tubes act as tunnels to shelter termite workers, protecting them from predators and potential desiccation. As to the wood itself, whether it is a fallen log or the floorboards above a crawl space, it matters little to these termites. One of the most destructive species of subterranean termite is the formosan subterranean termite, Coptotermes formosanus. This is an invasive species in the United States, and somewhat notoriously, it has devastated a number of old wooden structures in downtown New Orleans. Still, out in the woods, these destroyers of homes and other buildings are vital to the health of the ecosystem. Without the efforts of these various bacteria, fungi, and arthropods, a fallen tree would simply remain a fallen tree. Nutrients would remain trapped within the dead wood, unavailable for the growth of other plants. Eventually, were this pattern to persist, every forest would become a graveyard of dead wood incapable of supporting any new growth. Thankfully, this is not the case. In fact, a fallen tree may sometimes form the direct foundation for the growth of new trees. This phenomenon is often seen in coniferous forests where so-called nurse logs become homes for new saplings. Due to the continual slow decay process, there is a steady supply of available nutrients for plant growth. In addition, the decaying logs and stumps are often covered with moss. The moss tends to hold water, providing a relatively stable, moist environment ideal for plant growth. The benefits of rotting wood are such that a few plant species grow almost exclusively on dead stumps and fallen logs. One species of note is the red huckleberry found in the forests of Cascadia. These deciduous shrubs produce bright red berries that are edible, if a bit tart, and form an important food supply for many of the local fauna. So in the end, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody is there to carry it away, it eventually decays. However, new life arises out of this decay. For years, and sometimes decades or even centuries, entire worlds emerge and flourish among the bones of the fallen titan. This concludes today's little foray into the unknown. For those who are still curious, here are a few things you might try looking into further. If you found this enjoyable, by all means, say so. If you think others might enjoy this, by all means, share. If you're interested in seeing more of this channel, a subscription should prove quite effective. Until next time.